Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Carl the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting review because this is a film that, A, is based off of a franchise that has been dormant for several years now, and B, a film that I barely paid any attention to while watching it. Now that you have that context, let's talk about the franchise simply known as Wing Commander. Beginning in 1990 with the eponymous first entry, Wing Commander is a first-person action game set in the far future. The game's main storyline focuses on the war between the humans of the Terran Confederation and the hostile alien species known as the Kilrathi. It actually had a pretty decent cast with Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself playing the series protagonist, Christopher Blair, and Malcolm McDowell playing Jeffrey Tolwyn, who serves as the antagonist. The gameplay was also solid, especially for the 1990s. However, around the same time Wing Commander came out, another space opera game series began, and that was Star Fox, which was eerily similar and much more successful. It's worth noting that neither franchise has had an entry in several years, but it's clear that Star Fox is much more well known, seeing as how Fox McCloud, Falco Lombardi, and Wolf O'Donnell serve as fighters in the Smash Bros. Series. Anyways, moving on. In 1997, series creator Chris Roberts obtained the live-action movie rights to the game series, and decided to direct the film himself after working on the live-action segments in the third and fourth entries. I mean, it seems only fitting to have the creator of the games be involved with an adaptation. It's a good call to have the people being what made the original product successful to have involvement in the adaptation, like Mario Puzo and The Godfather, for example. However, at the same time, Chris Roberts was not a filmmaker. His prime skill was video game design, and that is said a lot in regards to the film's quality as a whole. It was released in 1999, and it just so happened that 4 other films either focusing on science fiction or with science fiction elements were released that same year, whether it be the same spring, same summer, or even just in general. The big one being Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which was an enormous hit because it's freaking Star Wars we're talking about. And it's also one of the first films I ever reviewed on this channel too, so there's that. However, Galaxy Quest, a parody of Star Trek starring Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, and Alan Rickman, was also released that same year, and that had a very similar tone to what the Wing Commander film would have. The Matrix, aka the Wachowskis' magnum opus, was also released in 1999 to great success, and that involved science fiction elements as well. Finally, the opening of Toy Story 2 featured Buzz Lightyear traveling to a distant alien planet to battle his arch-nemesis, the evil Emperor Zurg. That whole tangent aside, you can see that there were many more options for science fiction in 1999 than a film based on a video game, and it's evident in the box office and critical reception. However, it's been 25 years since the release of this film, and I've taken the time to watch it just to talk about it. So, what did I think? Well, let's find out. This is the 1999 adaptation of Wing Commander. After capturing a navigational device with shortcuts to their route to Earth, an alien race known as the Kilrathi can only be intercepted by fighter pilots who have a hold of the aliens until reinforcements arrive. And that was it. Like, seriously. That's it. So, that very paper-thin plot sounds surprisingly familiar in several ways, but the biggest problem this movie has is what it does with its runtime. For Christ's sake, this film does not use its time wisely. It focuses mainly on downtime the pilots have, barely focuses on any action or the war with the aliens. I think back to films like Star Wars in regards to how to handle conflict, but I'll go back to this in just a minute. The point I'm trying to make it here is that I thought this movie was terrible. It's boring, hard to watch, and it's a waste of time. And I'd rather spend my time watching the cinematics from the third and fourth games, which I easily could have done for this review. So let's talk about what bothered me the most about this movie other than its paper-thin plot and awful execution of said plot. So, right off the bat, this film totally wastes several cast members. Freddie Prinze Jr. was cast as the lead of this film, Christopher Blair, who has the potential for being a great lead character, but is ultimately soured by the bad script and the fact that he has nothing to do. Prince is a very charming actor, and I have liked him in everything I've seen him in, whether that be a pretty boy Fisher, a pretty boy narcissist detective, or a pretty boy Jedi. The only good thing about him being in this film is that he actively dunks on it as well. He was so excited to join the project, yet ultimately he was disappointed with what he had to work with. He said, and I quote, "I can't stand Wing Commander. I can't watch one scene of that movie. I read the script and loved it. So did my buddy Matthew Lillard. We both got the parts. We went on location and they said, here's the new script. It was a piece of crap." First things first, it says a lot about how humble he has been about this film. And the second and most important thing it says is that this movie must have gone through several rewrites to lead to such a safe and bland final product. I don't blame Freddie Prinze Jr. for this. It's not his fault. I'm glad he's got a large part in large franchises such as the live-action Scooby-Doo and its sequel, as well as Kanan Jarrus and the most recent Star Wars projects. This is the second way this movie relates to Star Wars, and that's a pattern, so just stay tuned. Moving on to Matthew Lillard's character, the only thing I remember about Marshall is his personality, which would have been much more likable if the script was much better. Again, I feel bad because Lillard is such a charming dude, and he played possibly the greatest slasher villain of all time with Stu Macher, one of the men operating the Ghostface persona in the first Scream movie. I'm also thankful that he's had the chance at big projects again, such as co-starring alongside Prince again in the Scooby-Doo films as Shaggy, and even voicing Shaggy in recent Scooby-Doo media, as well as getting a second chance with video game adaptations as the man embodying William Afton in the Five Nights at Freddy's film series. Finally, for the characters I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about, there's Saffron Burrows as Angel, and I'm not even going to say that much about her, other than the fact that she's just as obnoxious as she was in a film like Deep Blue Sea, which I covered earlier this year, #shameless plug. Yeah, like I said in that review, I thought the idea of the character was fine, but the execution and her attitude of the character just didn't work for me. Here, she has this tough, no-nonsense attitude, but she was more annoying, if anything, and that really bothered me, because I see the potential she has as an actress. Hopefully the next thing I see her in is better. And now, I ran out of characters to talk about. I don't know, David Warner is in this, and he plays Tolwyn, who is Malcolm McDowell's character in the games. So Ra's al Ghul and Metallo play the same character, but there's not much else to say after that. There is a group of characters, however, that I would like to talk about, but not for the right reasons, and those are the Kilrathi. For the so-called villains of this movie, they are barely in it. Okay, why? Say what you will about the villains in the previous movies I reviewed this season so far, but at least they all had presences and were all characters. The Kilrathi feel like plot devices, and the tension of the war between them and the Terran Corporation feels artificial, and is just there to advance the plot. Now let me bring up the Star Wars example I alluded to earlier. In the original trilogy, the long-occurring war between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire is the overarching plot. The original film quickly established the threat that the Empire was in the very first scene, where a group of stormtroopers and Darth Vader board the Tantive 4, kill several soldiers and their captain, and capture their leader to torture her. Now, imagine if that was the only scene until the climax of the movie and Princess Leia was rescued off screen. Would the impact of destroying the Death Star be the same? No, it wouldn't, and that's not what happened. The movie showcases how the Empire operates in several scenes throughout the course of the film, meaning their levels of command, their number of soldiers, their intimidation tactics, and their brutality, with the Death Star blowing up the planet of Alderaan and Darth Vader killing Obi-Wan Kenobi in a duel. All of this is paid off with the assault on the Death Star, where the rebels fight harder than ever to destroy it, and they succeed, despite the Empire's best efforts to fight back, and that led to them fighting back harder in the two sequels. With all of that in mind, we see the Kilrathi only twice in this movie. One time at the beginning, where they assault the base of operations for the humans, and once during the climax, where their entire fleet was destroyed. If this were like Star Wars and had sequels, we'd see how powerful they are in between, and this fleet being destroyed would lead to more of them going after the humans as vengeance, but you can't have that if you have inconsistent writing like what this movie actually has. There is no tension throughout most of the film because most of the time the tension is in the background and only used when the plot demands it. This is a mistake that completely tanked the movie, and is one of the reasons why I consider the adaptations of these characters from the games to be some of the worst villains I've seen in any movie. Here's to hoping that the game versions are more than just better. Okay, let's move on to something slightly less negative. The production design. I have to say that for all of its faults, the movie has some pretty looking sets for the spacecrafts and stations. They are decent. I mean, they're no USS Enterprise or the Millennium Falcon or the Nostromo, but they are serviceable, at least at the very least. I don't know why I said at least at the very least. I'm tired. Give me a break. The CG effects aren't too terrible either. They're not good, but they're not certainly awful. They're just serviceable. That's all I have to say. As for the music, it was composed by Kevin Kiner, and that is 4 Star Wars references in a row. Now, since he composes the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Bad Batch and Ahsoka, with the original theme from David Arnold being implemented as well. For the most part, I was happy to hear a familiar sounding musical score to that of the Clone Wars, since that's one of my favorite shows of all time. And it fit with the tone established, if you can even call it a tone. The one saving grace of this movie, to be honest. Finally, there's the action, and this movie has barely any action. And any action it does have is boring, and that's why I can't talk about it. I have no idea what else to say. By all accounts, this is a terrible, boring, and forgettable movie. And I had no idea that this could be as sterilized an action movie film as I can't even speak. This is just a disaster and a very big mistake on several accounts. Stick with the live action footage of the 3rd and 4th games while you are at it. All I can give this movie is a very low 0.5 point out of 10. Easily the worst one of these so far, and a movie I hope to never see again. Yeah, that was underwhelming for a review, and I hope to God I get something slightly more enjoyable in the future, ironically or unironically. At least I have Thanksgiving off, and that means no review until December 5th. Until then, and with that said, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.